Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Broken Brains with your host, Bruce Parkman, sponsored by the Mac Parkman Foundation, where we look at the issue of repetitive brain trauma, from repetitive head impacts that affect our athletes to repetitive blast exposure, which affects the brains of our special operators and military personnel, and how these conditions are affecting their mental well-being and their mental health. And why is that important? Because this is not trained in our nursing, psychiatric, medical or suicide prevention communities. That makes you the front line of defense to understand this issue so that you can protect those that you love and make informed decisions. So we bring on researchers, doctors, patients, players, everybody from this universe, so you can have that 360-degree look at the issue of repetitive brain trauma and the connections to brain damage and mental illness, so you can be informed. On today's show, we have another amazing guest here, Dr. Chris Frueh, coming in from the fine state of Hawaii, a clinical psychologist and researcher who's a very well-known mentor in our space here in Special Operations. Dr. Chris Frueh is a clinical psychologist and professor of psychology at the University of Hawaii, Hilo, with over 30 years of experience working with military veterans, special operators, and defense contractors. A leading expert in trauma and operational stress, he has authored more than 300 scientific publications and a graduate textbook on adult psychopathology. Dr. Frueh's groundbreaking work on operator syndrome explores the interconnected physical, psychological, and interpersonal challenges faced by elite military professionals. His current efforts to extend supporting the firefighter and first responder communities to improve health, wellness, and performance are also groundbreaking, as those are two critical segments of our population that get little to no attention at this time. He has advised the U.S. Department of Defense, the VA, the State Department, and has testified before Congress, and serves as a consultant to organizations to include the Navy SEAL Future Foundation, Hunter 7 Foundation, and the Boulder Crest Foundation. His insights have appeared in major outlets such as the New York Times, Time Magazine, The Economist, and Men's Journal. Thank you so much. This is Dr. Frueh, and I thank you so much for coming on the show, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. Honored to be here.
Really appreciate it. So just give us a quick background of how Dr. Frueh ended up becoming one of the foremost subject matter experts on the issues that are facing our veteran community today.
Well, I don't know that I can answer the latter part of that question, but I can tell you how I got my start. Father was a Vietnam veteran as a physician in the Air Force, so not a combatant, but he deployed to Vietnam when I was a child. I was about 5, 6 years old at the time. My hero from my childhood was my great-grandfather, who was a veteran of the Battle of San Juan Hill in the Spanish-American War, 1898. And you may be thinking, well, how was he my hero? Well, he lived to be 99 years old. So I was 14 when he passed, and I knew him pretty well, and I knew his story straight from him. I went to school I went to graduate school in clinical psychology to work because I wanted to work with veterans. I didn't know much about veterans in the sense of what they might need help with, but I did have a sense from both my father and my great-grandfather that there were lasting effects from war on soldiers. And so I started graduate school at the University of South Florida in Tampa, in your neck of the woods, in 1987. And the diagnosis of PTSD had just come into the nomenclature in 1980. Organized psychiatry added PTSD as an official diagnosis only 7 years before I started graduate school. So when I got into graduate school, I was pretty excited to become a PTSD expert and work with veterans on PTSD issues. So that was my first job. I mean, I did my dissertation and then my last year of training at the VA Medical Center in Charleston, South Carolina, which is affiliated with Medical University of South Carolina. And then I stayed there for another 15 years as a full-time clinician for 7 of those years. And then the next 8 of those years, I started getting research grants. So I had a mixture of research and clinical responsibilities. And then I left the VA in 2006. I loved the patients. I loved most of my colleagues. It was a great place to work, but I just lost faith that the VA from a monolithic, perspective, that it was doing right by veterans. And I just couldn't continue to be a part of it anymore. Many of the policies, many of the things they weren't doing, and then just a lot of the day-to-day failures that I was able to see in terms of taking care of veterans. I just decided it was time. And so after 15 years, I left, kind of thinking my work with veterans might be over. I took a job here in Hawaii at this little podunk. Oh, podunks, that's not, I didn't mean to use that word. That's not fair, but small university, liberal arts, small classes, teaching, well off the beaten path. But then I ended up with work in Houston. And so I was commuting between Hawaii and Houston every month. And I did that for 12 years. Baylor College of Medicine first, and then University of Texas. And in the process of doing that, I became involved with a small foundation in Houston that was set up by several former special operators. And it was really about creating a community there in Houston. So yes, they were called the Quick Reaction Foundation, and they had the ability to provide immediate resources to operators. I think they were capped at about $5,000, but they could be quick with it.
A lot of
You
money.
need you need a flight to get to a hospital on the other side of the country, boom, we could buy that ticket right away. But they also had happy hours and events. And so became my friend circle in Houston. And I'll just pause there because that's maybe where the story of operator syndrome begins. But I'll pause there to let you get a.
No, I mean, we could dive into quite a few things there, but going back to the point about the VA, I don't know if you can talk specifically about what you're, bothered by, but we do talk a lot on this show about, the reliance on, pharmaceuticals to address mental health issues instead of focusing on brain optimization and the well-being of the soldier. But
Yeah. Well, I can say it I can summarize it fairly quickly. And again, I left in 2006, so it's been 20 years since I've really had much direct awareness of what goes on in the VA. But my experience was a lot of the patients we served, well, most of the patients we served were heavily medicated. And that depended somewhat on the psychiatrist who was the prescriber. Some psychiatrists had a heavier hand than others, and that bothered me. We also saw a lot of people gaming the system, a lot of people claiming to be veterans who gamed the system. Some of them actually were veterans. Not all of them were. Some of my research was on treatment for PTSD. Some of it was on treatment service delivery models, different ways to bring the services to veterans. And some of it was looking at the role of disability seeking in PTSD care. And this has been well documented in a book by Daniel Gade titled Wounding Warriors. But the VA and policies on disability encourage, and have for a long time, veterans to come in and report PTSD because it's a very compensable disorder within the VA. So we did some research. We published a series of studies showing that the disability incentive had an effect on how people presented, how they represented the severity of their illnesses, and even how they shaped the narrative of their military career. So, for example, one thing that we saw was a lot of people coming in claiming either to be POWs of the Vietnam War, and they weren't. They were only about.
no, I'm sorry, I worked in the survival compound in Fort Bragg for, special operations for 3 years. And, we had Colonel Nick Rowe as the leader there. So yeah, there's not a lot of POW.
Well, I did some work with the NAM POWs, the NAM POW organization. So Mike McGrath, this was 25 years ago, was the president. And so I knew Mike, I worked with him. He could name every single Vietnam POW alphabetically.
Yeah.
That's one of the things they did.
Yeah.
So that if anybody got out, they could then represent back to America. Here's the list of guys that were in Hanoi Hilton.
That is
So I knew who were POWs from Vietnam and who weren't. I mean, there's a public list. You can go and you can look at the list. But the VA wouldn't do that. The VA took people at their word. Oh, you say you're a Vietnam POW? Okay. Well, cool. Because it was advantageous to the VA, they got extra money for every POW they enrolled.
Wouldn't you know? Yeah.
So that was a problem. The other problem that I saw over and over again was people coming in claiming to be special operations. Can't tell you how many SEALs and Green Berets from the Vietnam War
Posers.
came into our clinics. Yes. Yeah. So pretty sure I only in my 15 years at the VA, I'm pretty sure I only did one individual. He was from Marine Force Recon, and he had done some real stuff in Vietnam that I was able to know and document. I think that's the only special operator I ever met when I was working at the VA. Now we did what I would thought was going to be a pretty interesting research study, and I worked with a guy named Jug Burkett. Burkett wrote a book in, I think it was 1998 or 99, titled Stolen Valor. That's where the phrase stolen valor comes from, is his book.
All right. Did not know that.
And Burkett was a Vietnam veteran who got fed up with all the people out in the public eye and throughout the 80s and 90s claiming to be Vietnam veterans, usually claiming to be Vietnam veterans for a purpose like running for sheriff's office or advertising a business. And some of them were in the news for being, sick or having problems or legal difficulties, whatever. And so what he started doing was he would write to the St. Louis Military Personnel Records Center and get their DD-214s. And then he would expose them. And then he wrote a whole book about this. And then he worked with the FBI to identify and sort of bring down some of these posers. And then Congress created a law, the Stolen Valor Act law, which originally was going to be a felony, and I think now it's a misdemeanor.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, a lot of discussion about that. But
Yeah.
so let's talk about PTSD.
Hold on, let me finish.
Keep going.
Story.
Yeah, keep going.
I haven't even gotten to the good part. So
good. There's more.
Yeah, there's more. So I worked with Jug. I reached out to Burkett and said, and we collaborated on a research project where what we did at our end was we wrote to the person. We did a Freedom of Information Act. We got 100 consecutive patients reporting that they were Vietnam veterans, and we got their DD. And what we found was a shockingly low percentage of them, only about a third, told us the truth about their military service in Vietnam. And we had a handful of guys claiming to be SEALs or special forces. They weren't. We had other guys a lot of people who claimed that they were, in combatants, and they probably weren't, because nothing related to combat was on their DD-214, and their MOS was something in logistics and supply or whatever.
Right.
And we submitted it for publication, and people at the central office of the VA found out about it at the time it was submitted for publication. So I got a call from one of my mentors, who was a director of the PTSD Center, National Center in Boston. And he called me and said, "You can't publish this because it would be bad for the reputation. It could harm the funding for PTSD programs. It shines a poor light on the diagnosis of PTSD because it implies that that's all veterans want, is disability
Money.
for PTSD." And so I said, well, but the data are real. They're meaningful. And so we had this conversation. Well, but it's only 100. So it's a small sample. Yeah, it's a small sample, but 100 it's not really small. And if we find a huge signal in 100 patients, then maybe we should do a slightly larger study, replicate this, and maybe we'll uncover something here that we should know about. Nobody wanted to know about this. Nobody wanted to know about it. So he told me if I proceeded to publish it, my career as a scientist would be over. He threatened my career. And so we published it, and it got a lot of attention. We published it in the British Journal of Psychiatry in 2005. It got a lot of media attention. And I mean, all over the world, it got media attention. And so I was rewarded by that, by the VA assigning me a handler who had to follow me everywhere I went and be a part of every interview. And so my voice was very much shut down. And so I left. That's when I decided I can't work for an organization that's going to censor me like I'm in Soviet Russia.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, number one, thanks for your courage, because most scientists would probably not have published that journal. You got careers, you got a car, whatever your issues are. And of course they want the money to keep coming. But the issue of PTSD is that's a tough one, man. When I retired in 01, well, you never said anything about that stuff. You weren't gonna, and yet now, I mean, when I retired, I was told to go apply for disability. I didn't intend on it, but I did. And now in the veteran community, everything's about disability. What's your rating? How do I get to 100? Right? I mean, you got lawyers right now. I met a guy, cannot make this up, who was in the Navy for 4 months and is 100% disabled.
Yeah.
Never been in combat. 4 months. He barely went through basic training. What did you do? Like he was like a cook or something. I don't know. I mean, it was not like he was a Navy SEAL and he got hurt,
Right.
in buds or
Well,
something.
right. Well, I always want to be careful because it is possible somebody got injured and disabled in the first week of basic training. I mean, it's theoretically possible.
Yeah.
Probably they brought in somebody, probably those guys are people who really were fragile and vulnerable to begin with and really weren't appropriate to even have joined the military. But it's an issue. It's a huge issue. I never discourage anybody from applying for disability. In fact,
Mm-mm.
the operators I work with, I encourage.
You got to make them. Half those kids.
Yeah, I have to. Right. And they say, well, I don't want to take the money that somebody else might need from the VA. And
Yep.
I always say, don't think that way. That money is there for you. You earned it. And they're giving it to, when you look at the other people who are getting disability, you're at the far end of the spectrum of people who actually are very injured. And I think that leads us into the operator syndrome
It
discussion.
does. And I'll say that because when I showed up at a VA hospital for the first time, I think it was like 2015. I've been retired for almost 15 years. And this large African woman came out and said, "Where is that sergeant major?" I was like, and she grabbed me by my ear and she's like, "Where have you been?" I go, "What are you talking about?" And she said, this is your first time in the VA. I wanted some Viagra, right? I heard they gave it away for free. I'm like, yeah. She goes, and she had my DD-214, whatever, right? And my DD-214 is literally 2 pages long. And she goes, and I said, "Well, we're fighting 2 wars. I don't need to come in here for these guys. There's a lot of men." And she's like, "You deserve this." And she dragged me back there. She was so upset. And so, but to this day, I run across guys that, Cold War vets, we didn't fight in Iraq and Afghanistan. We jumped a lot. We did a lot. I mean, I fought in El Salvador and
It's the training.
it's the training. It's the training. And then a lot of them did perform highly classified roles where the psychological stress was through the roof. And I've worked with a bunch of these guys over the
Yeah.
years. But I talked to one guy, he's been retired as long as me. He's just trying to get he just applied to the VA. I like, come on, dude, get over. He's like, and the same thing over and over and over again. All these men and women that have done some really badass stuff.
I love the story you told about the woman that grabbed you by the ear and pulled you
He
in.
grabbed me by my ear.
That warms my heart. Yeah, I need to hear more. I want to hear more stories like.
Yeah, it is. But, the whole issue about, PTSD, we can go down a lot of trails on that. But there are many components to that we're starting to find out, and we know that repetitive blast exposure, and there's so many parts to these jobs now. Like we just saw a horrifying report from Dr. Pearl on the issue of CTE, the football disease, in our special boat operators. Because every time they smack those waves in the helmets and dude, it was horrifying to think,
Yep.
that what's going on. They said it was the worst, like worse than Aaron Rodriguez. Like it was crazy.
Yeah.
And this is part of our jobs that we have to function. There's a whole bunch of things to unpack this. So talk about operator syndrome and how did you start understanding that there was basically what could be a diagnostic criteria or a syndrome that surrounded a certain subset of military personnel?
Right. So here's the story. It's really pretty simple. About 15 years ago, maybe not quite, I found myself hanging out and spending time with a group of operators, and they came across branches. They were not all the guys that started this were Navy, but there were Army, Marines, intelligence agency, Air Force. Everybody was in this group. I would say there were about 30 or 40 guys. So early on, I was asked to sit down and talk with a few of them because they weren't doing well. So here's the very first conversation. And they pretty much all went this way. "Hi, what's going on?" And we're not in a clinical setting. We're in an office at the neuroimaging lab at Baylor College of Medicine. I was able to get them in under one of my research protocols to get their brain scanned. But first I had a 2-3 hour conversation with each of them. And those conversations went like this. "So what's going on?" "I don't know, doc. I'm not doing well. I don't feel like myself. Something's off. Can't put my finger on it. Okay. So immediately I'm thinking, oh, this is probably PTSD, right? That's the signature injury that we're all supposed to be on the lookout for. Here's a guy who was a Navy SEAL. He was a development group. He was on the missions that they made movies about. He's a tall man. He's a large man. He's somebody you literally look up to in a lot of figuratively and literally. And what was he doing in his life? He was living in a house out in the country about 45 minutes from town, not doing much of anything. He was drinking a handle of vodka every other day and, 3 or 4 handles a week. And he started smoking and he wasn't working out and he didn't have any energy to do this. And without going through the whole process of it became trial and error because I quickly realized he didn't have PTSD. He didn't have the fear reactivity. He didn't have the avoidance of military cues that you would expect with traditional PTSD. So it was like, well, this is something different. So took his brain scan, looked at it with a neurologist buddy of mine and I took him a handful. I think there were 4 brains that we looked at together. And I didn't tell him much about who the guys were. And what he said was these look like relatively healthy brains, no lesions, tumors, white spaces, relatively healthy brains, but based on the ventricle atrophy, probably the guys were probably about 80 years old. He thought he was looking at geriatric brains. And that was a what? Because this guy had never been blown up in combat. And this was well before Daniel Pearl's 2016 paper, which I consider to be a seminal moment in our understanding of brain injuries, blast brain injuries. So I was kind of flying blind at this point. How did they what happened to their ventricles? Why did they atrophy? These were not guys that had been blown up in an IED. They hadn't been in a helicopter crash. They hadn't, they didn't have anything that jumped out at you or jumped out at me at that time. So that suddenly they don't have PTSD, but their brains are 80-year-old brains. Then I got their hormones. So something I'd never before done, I said, let's get a hormone panel. And what came back was the testosterone of 80-year-old men. Now I'm really scratching my head because that didn't make any sense to me. How does this 37-year-old stud physical specimen have low testosterone? I'd never seen that before, never even thought about testosterone before. No, but none of us had. Mental health doesn't look at hormones for some reason. We should, but we don't.
Yeah.
It's it's a disgrace. One of the many disgraces to the field of traditional mental health care. Then I got sleep studies and they all sleep apnea. Then as we start getting their hormones treated, some other things, and I'm having a lot of conversations, I'm talking with these guys every, hour or two every week or more. And when I'm in Hawaii, we're having phone calls and I'm not charging, I'm not billing, I'm not keeping records. These are just conversations I'm having with friends and I'm functioning kind of like a coach. And as this handful of guys started to feel better, other guys from the group started coming to me and their friends and their friends. And if I fast forward to today, I've worked with about 600 operators individually, including private defense contractors, being Iraqi, about 50 Iraqi and Afghani interpreters, some in the US, some in their home countries. I was working with 4 Afghani interpreters who had been embedded with special operation units in the 2 months leading up to our abandonment of Kabul in 2021, and I lost all contact with them at that point. That's that's something that I have to own and live with, as we do as a nation. And that was the journey. So over time, as I started learning things, I just started writing them down. I kept a living document. Holy cow, these guys, they also have hearing problems and they have vision problems. So within a few years, I had this document and in my head, this phrase, operator syndrome. Here's another operator who has the syndrome. Traumatic brain injury, primarily from blasts, but also all the other things, diving, hard landings from jumping, rappelling, rucking, tactical driving, the vibrations of helicopters and fixed wing air platforms, many other things, combatives, Then there were impact injuries, but it was really the blast exposures that really stood out. And so TBI, and then from there you go, well, they have vertigo and disequilibrium from the TBI. They have headaches. They have cognitive problems. Memory, short-term memory, concentration are disrupted. Then there's the hormonal disruption, which in virtually all of the men meant low testosterone, but often elevated estrogen, progesterone, thyroid, human growth hormone, often out of alignment. Then we have the sleep apnea, the insomnia. What you realize is there was this chronic high op tempo that meant during the career, stress hormones were always elevated. There was not really sufficient recovery periods ever for a career in special operations, plus the night work, traveling across time zones, even training in the US. East Coast soldiers often fly to the West Coast and vice versa for training activities. And that circadian disruption has a profound effect on the brain and the body and the metabolism. And then you start to see that the metabolism, the cardio, metabolic functioning is all often kind of jacked up, excuse me, especially in first responders. You see the cardio metabolism,
Oh, my Lord, I can't even imagine what our first responder would look like.
the cardio metabolic dysfunction of first responders is just massive. Sleep deprivation, poor diet, no time to exercise, constant stress. I mean, it's perfect recipe for shortening the human life. And we're not even paying attention to it, which is tragic. And then you have the hearing problems, the vision, the balance. You have the existential issues that go with this. Described one of my own existential issues with working with the Afghanis. And I'll tell you, a few days ago, Wall Street Journal had an article about a group of Afghani refugees who are in Qatar,
Middle of the desert,
who may be sent home.
which would be
Well,
stupid.
tragic. And I'll tell you this, without going into the details, I worked with one of the enterprises that moved 60,000 of them out of Afghanistan since 2021. A year ago, I was on one of those flights that landed in Doha with an entire flight full of Afghani families fresh out of Afghanistan. Now I'm thinking those people are still sitting there in the desert and may even be sent home. It breaks my heart. And we got shut down in January of this year. All of that work, all of that effort got shut down. So we still have a lot of Afghanis who worked with us and their families who are in Afghanistan. So pause for questions, comments.
No, I mean, dude, the journey's amazing. Now you get to this point where you have this, that's an accurate description of how I retired. Sleep apnea, just a mess, right? And I was a sergeant major. My men would have wanted it like I did before that, but still, but it is something that, we just assume is old age or aging, whatever. And yet we really don't do about it. So,
Yeah.
so where did so now you've got a syndrome. So is this when you started writing a book to put the book out, or did you do any more research to validate and drive home the point?
The book came the book came out last year. Can I show the book?
Yeah, man, promote yourself, dude.
Shameless promotion here. It's a thin book, and it's an easy to read because I wrote it for the community. This is intended to be a self-help book for operators and their spouses. And really, it's relevant also for first responders and other soldiers in the combat arms.
A massive population.
So large groups. So the operator syndrome as a framework is relevant to many people, not just operators, but operators are the extreme end of this spectrum, I guess. So we published a medical paper in 2020, 5 years ago, and paper's titled Operator Syndrome. It was a descriptive paper describing this. And within the first few months of publication, it did the equivalent of kind of going viral, which I have over 300 scientific publications I've never experienced as a scientist.
That's pretty cool.
And it went viral, not among the psychologists or the FNVA people. It went viral with the community. So operators were sharing it. In my LinkedIn group at that time, I probably had 1,500 operators on my LinkedIn profile. And so when I posted it, they took it and it went to the grassroots, which was just amazing. It was amazing. That was beautiful. And everybody said I should write a book. A lot of my friends said I should write a book. So I did. And I wrote the book. It was published a year and a half ago, very specifically as a resource for the community, for the operators, for their families. So it's intended to be a practical guide. Here's what operator syndrome is. Here's what it looks like. And here's all of the many, many, many things that you can do to find solutions to each piece and part of it. And throughout the book, I've got quotes. So it isn't just all me. I've got quotes probably from 40 different operators from different branches. I've got quotes from spouses. I've got quotes from a handful of of clinical scientists and such. So some people have said it's almost more of an anthropological book than a psychology book, which I'll take that as I like that comparison.
And I think you're dealing with the largest gap that we have. I mean, we have problems with diagnosis, and the reason for that is the lack of awareness between military service, combat, and mental health. And everybody thinks, you saw too many bodies. You were deployed downrange. Somebody touched you when you were a child. Nobody. Even in our NICOs and polytrauma clinics right now, they're assessing that you have exposure, but then we go to talk about treatment. It's the same old, bag of drugs, therapy. You might get a horse, ride a horse. You get a dog. All right, I got it. But we got to
Yeah.
we got to fix this
We got to fix
because
the brain.
is
Yeah.
it all right? So let me ask you a question. So given everything that you just described, all that whole barrel of problems that our military operators, how many of those are related to their brain health?
Oh, well, 100%.
Okay. Yeah.
And we can leave it at training. Sometimes, man, I talked to a gentleman the other day who just happened to be in Hilo, and we met up for a cup of coffee kind of thing. And he said he loved the book. It was really helpful, explained all these things. And then he went on to basically express how he didn't feel like he maybe should have operator syndrome because he was never deployed to combat.
Good Lord. Yeah.
And I was like, well, dude, you were a Navy SEAL from basically 1980 to 2005. So 25 years as a Navy SEAL. And okay, you didn't go to the global war on terror and you missed Vietnam and you feel like maybe you didn't do enough. Stop it. Just stop it. Because you trained, you were the Ferrari in the garage, you were ready to go, you did all that training, you got all the injuries, and you trained and prepared and mentored the next generation of soldiers who did fight the GWAT. It's the training. And that's what I think a lot of the healthcare providers can't quite grasp. It's the training. It's not necessarily deployments, and not minimizing the deployments themselves, but the training itself does it. And here's part of the concept of operator syndrome is it's physiological. It's not about your Freudian dreams about your mother. It's not.
Right.
It's not that you are going to need to talk to a 25-year-old blue-haired therapist who has never seen or done anything anywhere, who has all these assumptions. And that's the problem, is all the assumptions that we bring to the therapy table. And I did it myself 15 years ago. I did it myself, assuming that it was all about combat, assuming it was PTSD from psychological trauma. But now what I say is it's physiological, and it's physiological starting in the brain, but the brain governs everything in the body. So metabolism is affected, hormones are affected, joint health, everything is affected, as you know. So because these are all interrelated, we can't just do one thing. We can't just go, okay, we'll treat one thing on the list and then we'll get to the other things next year. We got to do it all together.
Got to.
We got to be simultaneously evaluating and treating the hormones, evaluating and treating sleep apnea and insomnia, and then just go down the list. And by the way, I think this is the next piece of what you and I are maybe kind of what you're interested in, is we do have good treatments. We've got all these things that can help with brain health. Why are we not using them? Why are we still stuck on the bucket of pills and the therapist?
Well, since you're leading with the question, why are we? We've got, and I pounce on this all the time because in our legislation, we have legislation in Congress right now, hopefully going to be sponsored by Senator Mark Wayne Mullins, that talks about the issue of repetitive blast exposure, but on the treatment side, makes all the modalities from electronic modalities, HPOT, neurofeedback, photobiomodulation, TMS, whatever, psychedelics, stellate ganglion blocks, the brain optimization protocols, to get the brain healthy. We got all these out there. And we have over 90% of the veterans that do any one of these say, this has helped me. This has positively impacted my life. Yet every one of them's out of pocket right now. And I don't even know if that covers anything on your list. I would love to hear what,
Yeah. Well,
in terms
that
of,
is, yeah. My list is the low hanging fruit for anybody who's listening is get a hormone panel, get a sleep study if you haven't had them. Start there. Those are quick. Those are easy. You get objective data that any doctor can look at and go, yeah, that's an issue. And then they can be acted upon. I mean, we usually like to start with hormones, getting hormones addressed, which does not necessarily mean testosterone replacement therapy. It can mean a lot of other different things. From there, stellate ganglion block is another intervention I recommend, and it's outpatient, it's quick, it's not super expensive, and it works immediately. And it has a lasting effect for anywhere from 2 to 12 months, sometimes even longer than that. And now we're pretty sure that stellate ganglion block, also ketamine, also psychedelic journeys, all of those we're learning have profound benefits to brain health. They stimulate neurogenerativity, we're pretty sure. And that research is really going hard at that right now in a lot of different places around the country.
yeah, I could speak to all of that. I mean, when I woke up sucking my thumb about 4 years ago, um, I had to basically educate the VA on, what I had done to my brain. As a Green Beret, got shot in the head in training accidents, military rugby. That was all army rugby for 8 years. And I mean, just went on, parachute jumps. And the guy goes, do you have any scars? I go, yeah, come look at my eyebrows. He comes up, he goes, what the hell were you doing? I go, I'm a prop on military rugby, dude. I've had so many concussions, whatever. He goes, yeah, you're a mess. Cause I was not a good human being at the time. But after the stellate ganglion blocks and starting right into ketamine and, not just sleep, but just eating right, and just fixing my life
Yeah. Yeah.
has done amazing things. I'd like to know more about the research on, because when you do ketamine, you feel like you just ran a marathon. Your brain feels like it just ran. You are tired. So there's something going on there outside. And there's a whole nother part of this on the spirituality side where you literally start working on yourself as a human being. And that's a perk. That's a perk on
That's a,
top of fixing your brain,
yeah.
right? You start becoming a better human being. You're releasing trauma. Oh my God, the stuff that's I've dumped on psychedelic therapy. And, but yeah, to your point,
Not all from the military. We hear a lot of guys with childhood adversity that's through the roof.
the stuff we carry, my childhood was abhorrent. The stuff that I'm still trying to, my dad died 40 years ago. I'm still trying to make him proud. These are the things that we do as human beings, but the stuff that you get that you had before and then after the military, how good of a husband were you and how good of a
Yeah.
father were you? Can you
Yeah.
accept yourself, love yourself? These are
Yeah.
all evolutions of the human psyche that come back to us and they make us better on top of getting to the root cause of our problem,
Yeah.
which is those
Yeah.
22 years of
Yeah.
smashing that brain around.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that happens over time and probably pretty quickly in a career is the chronic systemic inflammation throughout the body, flowing in the bloodstream, but including the neurons, the neuroinflammation is a driver of psychiatric illness and poor brain health. It's also, by the way, a driver of cancer, heart disease, autoimmune diseases, depression, any psychiatric illnesses, any chronic health diseases, metabolic dysfunction, obesity, diabetes, etc. So we all in modern society should be doing anything we can to reduce the inflammation in our bodies. And for operators and soldiers and first responders, that inflammation is part of what's driving the dysfunction and the misery and the impairments to your ability to think and to function. So what can we do to reduce the inflammation? And anything we can do is really important. So that does mean eliminating, it does mean improving your diet, eating a clean whole foods diet, eliminating sugar, soda, junk food, fast food. minimizing or eliminating that as much as possible. Alcohol and tobacco are major, sources of inflammation. One of the things that can bring down inflammation is hot sauna and cold plunge. I prefer hot sauna. I'll do both, but I'll prefer hot sauna because we have more research on hot sauna. But it brings down the
Really?
inflammation.
I'm gonna jump my sauna tonight.
Go spend 20 minutes a week, 3 times a week, spend 20 minutes in a sauna. Good for your brain. It's even good for your heart.
What about, so I have a cold plunge and a sauna, but I heard that if you do them like you cycle them 3 times, it's supposed to do something for your HGH or something. I don't know, some kind of hacking thing.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I know that's a popular thing. The contrast to go from
Yeah,
one.
contrast therapy. Yeah.
It probably increases the misery of the whole experience,
Oh, it's horrible. I hate it,
which
man.
many
I'm
people
never.
probably assume means it's going to be better for you, right? The more pain, the
Yeah,
more gain.
I still think it's an ego thing. But talk about this inflammation. How can we naturally, get rid of that not, and I think you're talking about like inflammation throughout the body, not just neuroinflammation.
Right. Well, so diet, good sleep, moderate exercise, hot sauna or cold plunge are practices, meditation, any kind of quiet recovery, an hour or 2 a day where you can just kind of get absorbed into something, lose track of time. That's a good thing. And then, you talk to people, and then you have interventions like stellate ganglion and ketamine that can make a difference. There's a lot of people using functional medicine. Dr. Gordon's work using
Yeah.
peptides and dietary supplements. I think there's a lot of promise for that. And I'm excited to see what his protocol looks like in a few years and what kind of data he's got on his protocol.
We're testing that right now with 100 veterans in Florida.
Well,
We've
okay.
got a grant for 100 veterans for free ketamine treatment, and
Uh-huh.
100 veterans going to go through Mark Gordon's treatment. So
All
I'd
right.
love to understand what kind of data you would like to see us pull from that since we're
Sure.
running the study.
Sure.
So
Sure.
yeah, love
I'd be happy.
to.
Be happy to have that conversation
Yeah.
offline with you. I'm going to see Dr. Gordon next week.
Ah, dude, tell him hi, man. He's been on the show twice, man.
Right?
As a matter of fact, he's the guy that got us Ripid energy drinks for our Army Navy blast. I'll send you an invite. We have an actual rock and roll concert for suicide prevention and mental
Yeah.
health programs for veterans on the Army Navy game. So it's
At the
going to
Army
be
Navy game.
right. Baltimore Stadium, 3,000 people. We got Fuel playing. We might have an AC/DC cover active. They were my band. I played bagpipes in an AC/DC band, but they kind of went down that rock and roll, drugs and craziness circuit. So I think they might be back. We might bring it up there. But yeah, it's gonna be a great time. We'll get you an invite. But Mark's good people, man. Love Mark, man. Love him all day long.
Yeah, I'm going to spend 2 days with him next week.
Dude, tell him hi. But not contrary to your point, but I want people to understand that haven't done a lot of this. When you say, "Oh, you got to stop drinking," most of our veteran population go, "No way," or whatever, right? You got to take, no more McDonald's. I'll tell you, after a couple of years of psychedelic therapy and working on myself, I don't drink anymore. And I used to drink like a Viking every weekend. Everybody knew me as Pac-Man. You just lose the urge, which is you start really wanting to be healthy, and the things that make sense, you start
Yeah.
desiring more.
I
And
hear that a lot. What psychedelic medicines have you
I've
used?
done ayahuasca, psilocybin, ketamine, and I'm going through voluntary ibogaine treatment next week, just
Okay.
to experience it. So I like to walk the walk, and they don't make you any worse. I think that they are profoundly. I've watched, including special operations guys, go to these ayahuasca retreats with multiple suicide attempts, snorting heroin, and the worst parts of their life, and they come out with hope for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really amazing what we do. And so
It's powerful. It's really
very
powerful.
powerful as the ibogaine, the success rate with suicidal ideation and addiction treatments is unparalleled with anything we know about. Even in the pharmaceutical space cannot touch it in terms of effectiveness. Why it's a Schedule 1 drug, subjects to abuse when you don't want to abuse anything after you're done with it. And so go figure that one out. But we are very pro plant medicine when it's supervised, not, and there's nothing recreational about these things. You don't want to do them again. You just
Thank
dealing
you
with,
for saying that.
yeah,
Thank you for
there
saying that. I
nothing.
stand with you on that.
Yeah, there is nothing fun about these psychedelics, but the outcomes are always positive. People talk about bad trips. You want the bad trips. That's processing trauma. That's processing stuff that you got to get rid of. And once it's gone, man, Chris, it's gone. Like it's something else.
5 years ago, I was very negative on psychedelic medicines 5 years ago. And today I am not negative at all. I'm very supportive of it. I've worked with Heroic Hearts vets and Martin
Yeah,
Polanco at Thinking
great
Within.
organizations. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the anecdotal benefits I've seen in dozens of my friends, dozens of the men I've worked with, including many spouses, is just actually phenomenal. And now we have research coming out, published medical research, really supporting a really promising signal. We need a few more randomized controlled trials, but I think we're going to get to the point where VA and modern medicine is going to have to accept we have very legitimate, powerful treatments here that are going to threaten the big pharma model,
oh my
perhaps.
God, farmers running scared from this, man, because I was talking, we just were at MCon yesterday, which was
Oh, okay.
yeah,
MCon. I did that
yeah,
last year.
yeah. We did the Vegas, we did MIC. We're out there talking about Vincent juice, and it's amazing. We had an NFL concussion spotter come up to us, and he's like, I'm the guy that's looking for guys on the field. He's a former Marine. And we started talking about, repetitive impacts and repetitive blast exposure and all that. And he goes, so you're not against contact sports? I go, no, buddy, we're trying to make them safer. I said, what would you say about waiting till 14, taking the contact out of practice and just playing football games? Because nobody's going to be playing in the NFL except for a few select. He goes, I could get all behind that. I said, dude, that's how we
Mhm.
get rid of CTE. But we've got an entire industry of CTE people that don't want to want to see CTE go away, right? It's like, this is crazy. So, but to your point, I do believe that the wheels are starting to turn, that if we even go back and are unafraid to open up that book on, the fact that we've lost the equivalent of 2 wars of combat veterans every year to suicide. And we open up that book and we looked at, MOSs, and we looked at, combat deployments, and we looked at medical records, and not including bad conduct discharges and other honorable discharges. We're going to find that we failed a lot of people, and we didn't do a lot of things right. And then it's our job, with the knowledge that we're gaining, specifically from you, sir, is how do we go forward and do a better job? And I was on General Fenton's brain health team up until he retired a couple of weeks ago. And I saw a man, a 4-star general, that was fully committed to addressing this issue. And, I'm on the outside now. He's looking at our guys. And the meetings he had were all about, look, we got to go whack people. We got to be the most lethal force out there. And we are going to be. But what can we do now to make sure that we are, and that our kids are taken care of? And the man is just an amazing, amazing leader. But they're addressing this now, and which is great. But we still got
I first heard of General Fenton when he was Colonel Fenton. And it was in the context of an early conversation with one of my guys from Special Forces who was telling me, if you ever come across this guy named Fenton, he's the most amazing leader of men.
yeah, yeah,
And
dude.
I've heard what you just said many times over.
Yeah, I knew him as a captain, and hey, I'm a defense contractor. I do some stuff, and that's how we knew each other again, because I ended up working for him. Like, people would contract me out back long time ago.
Mhm.
And he goes, Parkman. I go, sir. And so then he'd always say, tell me about brains. So we'd go in the corner, and that guy would dedicate 15 minutes to me while his entire staff was like, we got to get the general. And he's just
Mhm.
so interested in, how can we fix this? How can we diagnose it? Because, the fact is, how do you tell guys that are suffering from mental illness that, look, dude, you have trained yourself into mental illness. We now have to take a step back, and we're going to have to do some career changes for a little bit and help you recover, because you're not crazy. And that's what, a lot of our guys are naturally afraid of.
Well, it's physiological. So what I say is it's physiological. That means it's inevitable. You do these things long enough to your brain, frequently enough to your brain. It doesn't matter who you are. Your brain is going to be affected. It's going to be injured, and you're going to develop these things over time. There's no way we could, if we put your hand on a block and hit it with a sledgehammer, your hand is going to be mangled. It's going to be bloody and mangled. It's not your fault. It's not because you're weak. It's not because you have a deficient hand to begin with. It's inevitable.
Yes, sir. Can we also state that because it's physiological, it can also be addressed and improved and,
Yep.
repaired? We're not gonna get, can we, is that also a true statement?
Yes, yes, and I mean, we're not gonna reset you to where you were when you were 18. That's not gonna happen for any of us, but we have so many things that can bring healing and recovery, happiness, functionality, and that includes as you get better, and as you heal, as you recover, your family, your marriage, your children.
Oh,
There's just I always wanna be hopeful for everybody. And to my rage, my anger is we have solutions. We have interventions. We are choosing not to use them for some
we are.
reason.
We are.
And change is happening very, very slowly. It's probably happening. Last year in the National Defense Authorization Act, a year ago, there was a thing in there. I don't know what you call it, whether it's a rider or a paragraph, but about hormone health for soldiers. And it was a list of things that needed to be done for soldiers' hormone health. It didn't survive. It got pulled out towards the end of the process. But they did keep it in. What did stay in the 2025 NDAA was that the Secretary of Defense would have to come to Congress this year and give some kind of report on hormones. So they had to do something. And from what I hear, Secretary Hegseth is very much interested in doing more for sleep and hormones for soldiers, both for quality of life, but also to enhance lethality.
He's very big into optimization, which
Yeah,
goes both ways. Optimization can also help heal a little bit of the pain
exactly,
that we're
exactly,
going through.
exactly. And as I'm sure this past January, just 10 months ago, CMS came out and finally identified traumatic brain injury as a potentially chronic disorder. It's not something you have it and we treat it and then it's all over.
And then how do we, yeah, and now we got to do something with this, which is why, your book, your position is all about action. And that's the one thing we've talked about this. I'm going to introduce you to a small group of people that are getting ready to put together a program to really address this. It's something that, kind of the catalyst was my son and our foundation getting together. And then as we host the summit, the only summit on repetitive brain trauma every year. We'll get you invited to next year. I think Dr. Pearl might end up helping us get sponsorship. But, by bringing these people together and talking about the lack of action, it became aware that, dude, we've been talking about this stuff for years, man. We got to do something about it. We still got, yeah, we still got 22 a day or 44, whatever. There's still one too, over one is the editor is more than enough. We still got to do something. So I'm going to introduce you to a small group of guys that are getting together and girls to go and address this. We're handling the legislative aspect of this, but Dr. Free, your message that, yeah, you've served your country. Now you can be repaired. Now we got to get that out to the first responders. Oh my God, what those men and women see is far worse than what most combat veterans see after they come back for the majority of these people, what they do in their jobs. And we don't do anything for them at all.
Yeah, and I never want to compare one man's trauma to another man's or a woman's, but one of the things that's truly unique for first responders is they're fighting the battle in their own
Oh my God. And they're
right
taking
there,
it home every
and they're taking
day.
it home.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will compare it to my, 21 years of military service. Talking to them, I can't compare what I do. I would have never been even to be a cop. Just be able
Yeah,
to take that home, go up and down like that
yeah,
every day.
yeah.
We definitely need a higher level of respect for what these folks do for our society.
And we've got a paper we're writing right now where we're taking all the existing medical research on law enforcement and we're mapping it onto the operator syndrome framework. And it's right there and
Really,
white. It's very
not
clear.
surprised.
They have everything on there.
Not surprised.
And their mental health care, they don't have a VA. They don't have a
No,
national entity.
they have
So
nothing.
it's a patchwork regionally. And some places do really provide really good care, other. I'm working with a private company, a startup company that has created a solution for law enforcement and firefight, all first responders. The concept is former operators who are providing individual one-on-one coaching to first responders. and it's remote, it's via Zoom, but they use their own, their own experiences and their own credibility, which, your average therapist can't have, and their own lessons learned. And they're using the operator syndrome and they're bringing it all together to provide one-on-one coaching. And it's turning, I mean, they just started earlier this year, but they've raised good venture capital money, and they've signed about 50 or more, probably by now more, departments around the country, police and fire departments, including some very big city.
Let me know more about that because my daytime job, we're getting ready to get skewed by two very large channels dealing right into law enforcement. And we can at least create awareness when we're talking to them about
Yeah.
our product. We're on the
Okay.
data side. And I'll talk to you about that too, because I own some very cool patents that can help you with your data normalization at a fraction. I'll donate it to you. That'll take multiple disparate data forms and put them into one for whatever platform you want.
So the group I'm working with is called Sharp Performance,
Okay.
and it's started by a Green Beret.
Of course it was.
Of course
It wasn't a book. It wasn't a movie. That's what a SEAL would do. I can say that.
Yeah, although he has pretty nice
I
hair.
love my SEAL buddies. I love them. I
He
love
has
them.
pretty nice hair, so maybe he's not really Army.
Big watch.
But yeah, I should introduce you. You might enjoy. I'll send you a little information.
I love to meet him. Yeah, I love them. Only to help out, right? As much as we can, promote them
Well,
if I can help out.
he'd be a good guest for your.
Oh, dude, sounds like it. So, Dr. Frueh, as we close out, tell our audience how they can find you. Talk to them about the book. Where's it located? Do you have a website? And what else are you working on? Promote yourself, man. Go ahead. Throw it out.
Yeah. Well, I do have a website. It's my name, chrisfree.com. I don't know how exciting that would be for anybody. The book, Operator Syndrome, is easy to find. You can order it directly from Ballast Books, or you can get it from Amazon, or wherever books are sold, as they like to say. What I'm working on right now, I left out one of the most exciting things I'm working on. So there is one VA program now working with the Operator Syndrome framework, and that's the Palo Alto VA. They have a program for operators there, and they've collected enough data over the last couple of years. So their research team is just getting ready to submit a paper empirically validating the Operator Syndrome framework. Wow. And the data is really strong.
Let me know if we have strong ties to the James B. Haley Clinic here at Tampa Bay, at Bay Pines. So let me know if maybe we can template that, or we can help expose their program when you're ready. No big deal.
Okay.
Cool beans. All right. Well, Dr. Frueh, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've heard about you for a while now. It's an honor to meet you, and I'll make sure I get out for a musubi here sooner or later and sit down with you and have that cup of coffee.
Love to do that. Come on over to Hilo.
Will do. Never been that one. All right, folks, another great episode of Broken Brains. Look at the stuff that we're learning. Remember, this is something that's not studied out there, so pay attention. Go do your own research. Go do your own learning. Remember, download the book. It's free on the website. Broken Brains and Youth Contact Sports Become Smart, or on your kids playing sports. Our app, Smart or Head Safe, is on the Google and Apple Play Store. We have the Army-Navy game December 13th, Fuel Concert, Ripid Energy Drinks, Horse Soldier Bourbon, all you can eat, all you can drink. Come on down. It's our biggest fundraiser of the year, and everything goes to our veteran population for mental illness programs and suicide prevention. Like us, subscribe us, send us around. We need all the help we can get. And remember, if you got children, they only got one melon. We've got to take care of it. Do a better job. God bless you all. We'll see you next time on Broken Brains with Bruce Parkman. Take care.